All right. Okay, thank you so much for coming to this new program that we have here for maximizing production in your home garden. You can't see me, but my name is Lisa Klein, and I do a series of In the Garden webinars for the UGA Extension Gwinnett office that are available all across the state and even out of state. So if there's something that's interesting, um, you know, I am happy to, listen to you and maybe even write a program on what you have. Sorry, like I said, lots of technical difficulties here. Um, on suggestions that you come to me for. So I'm always on the lookout for good stuff, and I thought this one would be very useful. We have a lot of folks that do community gardening in Gwinnett County, and I know in the greater Atlanta metro area. And so a lot of those folks are left with a 4x8 bed and questions on how can I end up making enough food out of that to feed my family, or even kind of growing that idea to how can I take this small space that we have and expand that to enough food to donate a food bank? And that's a good question because it's a very small area, but there's a lot that you can do. So I'm going to go through some just generalized techniques, some tips, things like that. And as always, I'm happy to provide my slide deck for you if you are interested. So just send me an email. That email will be at the back half on the last slide. And I'll leave that up there for a bit while I take questions. And you can just, send me a request and say, hey, I'd like your slide deck for the maximizing production in your home garden. And I will get that off to you. I also record. And so the recording of this presentation will be up on our YouTube channel. May not be until mid-July. I'm actually headed off on a road trip up the East Coast. So I will be, tomorrow is my last day for a little while, and then I'll be back and I'll play catch up and get some stuff back up there on the YouTube channel. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and start this. So, there are a lot of reasons why you might want to increase the production. Some people are happy to just kind of tinker with the gardening, and they're put a couple tomatoes in there, maybe some peppers, that kind of stuff, and they come and go. And to them, it's not really a big deal that every time they get a few things to take home, they're happy and they incorporate that into their meals, but they're not really serious about it. And that is fine. That is perfectly fine. We are happy that you're doing that and enjoying gardening. This presentation is for those folks that are like, hey, I've got 6 kids to feed and produce is really expensive. So let's get to business here and grow a lot of stuff so that I don't have to pay as much at the grocery store. Or for those folks that work in a community garden and maybe have share beds that they're trying to produce as much produce as possible in order to donate to food banks. So there's a lot of different reasons. Basically, just more food for the effort that you're putting in. Um, sharing is a good thing. We all, I'm sure if we've gardened before, maybe some of you are new to it, some of you are veterans at it, but we've all had abundance years where maybe the zucchini produced way too much or cucumbers, and we were just trying to give it away because we had way too much. So this is a good way to really take control of the reins on that and put some planning into it so that you can do that all the time. And it's not just a surprise, a pleasant surprise. Some people just like to experiment and they want to see, well, what if I grow this? Well, what if I grow this with that? What is it going to do? I want to see. I'm curious. And this is a good way to kind of do that also. And learning. Some of us just are curious again about what will grow and what won't grow. We have a lot of folks that move to the metro area here in Atlanta from all sorts of places around the world, in the US and outside the US. And so coming here, gardening can be different. uh, we have roughly, 4 seasons, but we can garden all year round here, which is really nice. It just takes a little bit of planning. So, and then finally, ecological reasons. We want to do more of our own. We want to understand the growth cycles. We want to make sure we're using more organic stuff in there. We want to try to promote soil health. And of course, for pollinators, that's always a big thing with us here at Extension is pollinators. We want to support them as best as we can. So this is a good way that you can incorporate that. All right. So having a plan when you want to maximize support, the production in a small area is very important. So again, we're just going to kind of breeze through some of these ideas, and then we'll dive in a little deeper towards the middle and end. So have a plan. Prep your beds before planting. We generally think now that no-till or no-dig gardening is going to be better for soil structure. We have the mycelial network, which is in all these little fungal root systems that kind of grow through the soil biome. And you have worms and you have other small insects and things that set up shop in there. And when you're constantly digging it up and turning the soil over and disrupting that, that does kind of change things in the soil biome. And so there is a lot of evidence that goes to show that the less you disrupt that area, the healthier it will be. Also, routinely amending your soil. Get some compost in there. Try to do that every single year. UV radiation will break down organic matter. So the sun breaks down organic matter. Whether you use mulch or not, we'll talk about mulch, but whether you use it or not, it's important to replace that. If you've ever had a raised bed and you put a lot of some type of a soilless mix or soil substitute, or even some mineral soil in there mixed with compost. And over the course of a year, seeing the level of that drop, that's as that soilless mix continues to decompose and as that organic matter starts to break down. So you need to add something back to that. Restricting traffic to mulched walkways to prevent compaction. Compaction is a big problem, both in just regular farming, large scale farming, but also in small scale farming. So you can see down there in the bottom picture that you have a nice walkway with straw on it that you can walk on. And then you have these slightly raised hills where you've got your brassicas, maybe your cabbages and broccolis and things growing. So very easy, very accessible. And then you don't have to worry about compaction. The soil is going to be nice and healthy where those plants grow. And having a soil test done. So that is something that we really recommend. You can see that the red marker just zoomed up from the bottom, and this is basically a pH scale. You can see the pH scale down there, 7 being neutral. Anything higher than that will be alkaline. Anything lower than that is acidic. And that red boundary line that just went up, that's where plants really like to be. Most plants, not all of them. Some of them like more acidic things like blueberries and some azaleas and gardenias and such, and some things like slightly less acidic and they like to be above 7. But generally speaking, most plants are going to prefer that 6.2 to 6.8 ish range, somewhere in there. And our soil tests at Extension, pretty simple, and good old S1 soil test. We recommend getting those every couple years or so that you can kind of keep tabs on what's going on in your garden. As you can see here, very simple. We don't do nitrogen because that's highly variable, but you've got phosphorus, potassium. Those are two of the macronutrients plants need the most of. Calcium, magnesium, and zinc, the next set that they need the most of. Very easy to read. Nice line across there. Anything below it means that you need more of it. Anything above it means you don't need more of it. And then, of course, the pH. That's what I was referring to. So you can see here, they'll give you a pH reading. In this case, not needed at all. You've got a pH of 6.9. I think that's what it is. It's a little blurry. And that means that you don't have to amend, which is great. But this is good information to have if you are wanting to kind of maximize and get the most kick for your buck. So take advantage of every growing space. So you're going to use raised beds generally to avoid compaction in weed seed banks. Now that's not a hard and fast rule. If you've in-ground garden, that is fine. If you use hugelkultur, that is fine. If you use containers, that is fine. We don't have any hard and fast rules here. You can do whatever you need to do within the space that you have it. You can maximize your production anywhere. It's perfectly easy to do. It just takes a little bit of planning. And so grow bags and buckets, easy to source, very cheap. You can get those readily just about, well, Amazon. You can get anything on Amazon. And make sure they have drainage holes, and you can put those in areas along your raised beds or along a fence or along a side of a house. You got to think outside of the bucket here, haha, or the bed. And that's going to be, your bounds. You really don't have any unless your HOA gets a little angry with you, and then you got to stay within the bounds of that. But other than that, do whatever you want to do. Any container's good, really. Grow along fences. Consider pollinator beds there, herbs, maybe some plants that might need support. They can grow up the fence, easy peasy. And plant herbs in your ornamental gardens. A lot of them kind of have pretty colors. Basils can have purples, mint, make sure that's in a pot. But dill and parsley, as those bolt in their second year, they kind of resemble Queen Anne's lace, and they're kind of pretty. Plus, they're host plants for some pollinators, so it's a win-win. You can plant squash on top of your compost pile. The root system will help try to break down. Sometimes they're volunteers, so you could just do that, just allow it to kind of do its thing. Also consider cold frames or high tunnels. These are protected areas where you can grow in cold weather. There's a big push for tiny greenhouses that you can buy online. They're not very big. They might be like 4x6 or something like that, but you can really do a lot with there. If you pipe in some heat, you can get your seeds started early, and there's a lot you can do. So think about that. Grow more in partly shaded areas. Some of us are not blessed with big sunny areas. We got to figure out what we can do with what we have. So many lettuces, Asian greens, leafy greens, that kind of stuff, they'll do pretty good in 4 to 6 hours of sun daily. So you do need to know how much sun you get. And there are meters that you can leave out that will actually read to see how much sun you're getting. And those are wonderful. They're not that expensive. You can get them online as well. Blackberries and raspberries grow pretty good. They do need about that 4 to 6 hours of sunlight, so just keep that in mind. But you definitely can grow them, set up a trellis system or along a chain link fence. There are certain types of determinate tomatoes and some of the patio tomatoes that do pretty decently with not nearly as much sun as some of their traditional counterparts. You can find some bush cucumbers that do pretty good in that 4 to 6 hours of sun. Herbs like parsley, basil, sage, thyme, those will do fairly well in 4 to 6 hours. Just know you can't go much less than that four, or you're going to start to see that the plants are just not going to produce well. So choose the appropriate plant. Some of them are going to be heavy producers compared to other varieties. There's so many varieties of vegetables out there. I know a lot of us go to the big boxes in the spring and we see all the plants and we get all excited. But man, is there a world of new and different seed out there if you're willing to start your own seed at home. I've got several videos on the YouTube channel, and I try to do a seed starting class in the spring so that folks can not be as intimidated, because really it's not that hard. There's just a few rules that you need to know, but other than that, anybody can afford a fairly cheap setup these days with LED lights and a seed warming mat. It's not that expensive, and then you've got like this whole world of cool new plants, new vegetables that you can try for that year. So indeterminate tomatoes are going to produce a little bit more than determinants. If you're not familiar with what the two are, are. Indeterminate just basically means you get a small production ongoing throughout the whole summer until frost. Determinate means that as it grows, it produces one big crop, one big hurrah, and then it's done. And then the bush will basically die. Don't typically choose those dwarf or patio varieties if you're, because again, those are smaller plants, but if you're on a patio situation, it's perfectly fine. Don't feel like you can't do that. They're going to typically have smaller fruits. Again, that's okay if you have a small situation where you have a balcony or something. But if you have more space, choose larger plants. Choose those plants that are going to produce more fruit. Some types, tomatoes, cucumbers, produce a larger harvest than per plant than others. Become aware of those. I've got some lists further on in here. And heirloom tomatoes are really yummy and they have some really cool colors and stuff, but they are not disease resistant. So if you've got some disease issues with blight in tomatoes, consider some of the newer varieties like Defiant that have some resistance to late blight, which usually knocks out most tomatoes. Georgia is horrible with heat and humidity, fungal issues. So if you have that problem, I do in my garden, don't be sad, just choose some of the newer varieties, and those are readily available online. Another thing you can do, grow vertically. So there are all sorts of different methods out there for that. I love that I see these cattle panels that are bent over on a 4x8 raised bed. It fits nicely in there. You get a couple of posts to hold them in place, and you can grow all sorts of vining stuff. You can grow tomatoes, you can grow cucumbers, you can grow squash. You can buy melon bras, and they're not holding the kinds of melons you think they are. They're off Etsy, and you tie them up, and you get your watermelons, and your cantaloupes, and your honeydews, and your other things like that. And they literally are a little sling that hold to the cattle panel and hold and support that little melon. So yes, you can grow watermelon or cantaloupe or honeydew or any of those in a raised bed. And so space constrained, if you've got these large vines, they're actually growing up and over. So that's an option. Grow blackberries or raspberries against fence. We talked about that. Strawberries, herbs, lettuces. You've got towers. You see a tower there. You can do teepee towers for pole beans, things like that. And then a framework supporting netting, like Florida weave, which you see right down there in that smaller photo. Never leave an empty space. So any place you can grow, you should grow. So if you notice that maybe you had a bad germination rate in your seed, or some of those transplants kind of died back and don't look so good, go back and replace them. You might want to plant a fast maturing crop like radishes or lettuce in space. This is called a transitional crop in between a cool season and a warmer season. Maybe plant another crop immediately after. Again, we're going to go into this. When you're thinning out overseeded rows, you can try to use these plants to kind of make microgreens if you're weeding them or if you're thinning them out when they're older. So basically, microgreens would be good for salads and things like that. Bean sprouts, if you think. And then always have those living roots in the soil. So cover crops. There's all sorts of cover crops out there that you can get. I did a no-till class. That video is up on our YouTube channel. It talked all about the different cover crops. So go check that out. And let's jump into succession planting. So maximizing production, really the big thing is about succession planting, because this is how you do it. This is how you really get the most out of what you're trying to grow. There are four different types, or four main types of succession planting. That's going to be seasonal replacement, interval planting, intercropping or companion planting, and same vegetable, different variety. And we'll go into those. So basically what you're doing is, that technique means that you're going to stagger those plantings of the same or different crops to kind of ensure a continuous harvest. So if something is rolling off or done producing, like say lettuce in the spring, you're before that happens, maybe planting a summer crop in there. And so as that summer crop starts to grow up, that spring crop starts to bolt and die. And then you just are constantly moving things in. You're adding more crops so that you can get a higher production out of the small space that you have. We're very lucky here in Georgia. We can pretty much grow things all year round, which is awesome. But you got to know how to do it if you want to get the most out of a space, a small space that you're growing in. Um, Planning is essential. You have to know how to do that. Again, we will kind of talk about how to do that. So just know it's not something that you can just, oh, these seeds look good. Let's throw them in there. Or let's throw these plants in here. They were on sale. You got to really think about it. And it means you're probably going to have to get a garden journal. There are publications out there. I'll have some QR codes. You see one here for succession planning out of Oregon State University. It's a very good one. There's several out there, but this one really kind of tracks a lot of it. So I recommend this one. Again, I will be happy to provide the slide deck, so don't feel like you have to uh, get this information now. You can always hit me up with an email, and I'm happy to send that to you, and then you have it there, or it'll be on the video and you can get it there. So try to make it as easy as possible to get reference materials. So seasonal replacement. This is the most common method of succession planting. So you're going to plant two different crops over a season or a season and a half, or one right after another in the same spot in your garden. So that would be like if you had a spring garden with lettuces and peas, like snap peas, and then you transitioned into your summer crops of tomatoes and squashes and things like that. So your cool season, you're typically going to plant in fall or early spring. You get that kind of window there where you can do that. And some examples are arugula, beets, bok choy, broccoli, carrots, that kinds of stuff. Warm season, those are going to be planted during frost-free periods. So these plants are summer plants generally. Basil, cilantro, a lot of your herbs, corn, dill, eggplant, melons, tomatoes, all those popular things that you see in summer gardens that tend to need the more intense sunlight and really appreciate the warmer temperatures. And then you have the transitional vegetables. So these are ones that you can plant in between the cool season and the warm season that generally will mature quickly and can grow very fast in that short period of time. So that gives you an extra little window of growing things that you can get out of that shoulder season, if you will. And they straddle both seasons. So like radishes, scallions, and then baby greens. So with the Georgia weather, which can sometimes be cooler, but sometimes be hotter, you might want to try heat tolerant varieties of lettuce like black seeded Simpson. And then towards the fall, when you're moving into that shoulder season, Butterhead or Butter Crunch. And you can see I've got a little chart down there that late winter, spring, plant cool season, frost tolerant, early summer, cool season vegetables mature, harvested, plant that transitional crop again. We'll have a more, I don't know, exact plan for you to look at and some more charts and stuff. But this is just a quick glance that you can look at and go, oh, okay, yeah, now I understand that better. It makes sense. So interval planting, that's the next type. So planting the same vegetable in a small batch with staggered plantings every 1 to 2 weeks, or even a little longer. So what that's going to do is it's going to create a slow and steady harvest. Most people don't want 80,000 zucchinis or 52,000 summer squash in a 1 or 2 week period. And somehow that's what ends up happening. We also end up with 50,000 squash bugs or vine borers. And so this is a good way to kind of circumvent some of the damage that you get because you're constantly putting in small, next plant. So 2 weeks later, you're planting another batch. Another 2 weeks, you're planting another batch, that kind of stuff. So for this, you're going to use fast maturing crops like salad greens and radishes. Remember, those are the transitional ones. Allowing you to avoid that harvest fatigue. So you're not having 82,000 of one vegetable all at one time when all your friends have the same and you're trying to beg off and give this stuff away and you can't because everybody else has it too. This allows you to have a small harvest over a much longer period of time. It also maximizes the space. So just as one crop is finishing up, you can have another one that's starting. And so you're constantly moving, always having something growing. And here you can see kind of the different crops that you would put them in the intervals that you would put them in at. So every 7 days, you've got a list of things there. Every 10 days, another list. Every 14 days, another list. And every 21 days, another list. Intercropping or companion planting. So companion planting kind of fits under the heading of intercropping, and it's kind of the same thing. So don't let that confuse you. They kind of are about the same, but there's some differences. So I'm going to try to go through that. So companion plants can help improve the soil. So maybe you're planting legumes that are nitrogen fixers, and those legumes in that particular spot are going to help put some nitrogen in the soil. And then the next time you put corn, which is a heavy nitrogen user. So that's a companion planting. It might help reduce pest damage by luring away some of the insects that are feeding on your plant. It helps you reduce the use of pesticides on crops, and it can also increase the beneficial insects that can come in and help you control some of the bad bugs. So the traditional how to plant two crops close together to get a staggered harvest of the two and extend your garden space. So this is going to work really well when you're starting seedlings indoor. Again, don't be scared of starting seeds indoors. We can totally help you out with that in extension. It's actually not that hard. After the transplants have had time to grow, then you're going to use those intervals that I showed you in the previous slide for whatever vegetables you're growing to put them out over those typical intervals. So that's the traditional intercropping way. But it goes so much further than that. So you have short maturity and long maturity crops. This is where you maximize production by planting those short maturity crops or the catch crops like the radishes. Remember, I said those are transitional. They typically grow really quick. So you can kind of stick them in there in that like shoulder season, if you will, turnips, mustard greens. You can put them among cabbage or cauliflower that'll take many more months to reach full size. You can overlap the winter and spring crops. So you can overlap the lettuce with summer crops like squash. Choose some of those that might be more heat tolerant, like I mentioned in one of the previous slides. So as that lettuce starts to die in the heat of the summer, the squash will then grow bigger. So you can continue to harvest your lettuce and you're already letting your squash grow. So you're maximizing your growing season. Deep and shallow rooted plants. So you can put shallow rooted plants like scallions with deep rooted plants like lettuce. They're growing at different levels in the soil column. So they are not really competing with each other as much as, you would think they would. Vertical and ground cover plantings. So here's just a listing of a few. You've got sunflowers and cucumbers. Think of the Three Sisters method. So you've got the corn and the beans, and they're the beans and maybe the squash are using the corn to kind of climb up. And the corn is using the beans, which are nitrogen fixers, to make that nitrogen to feed it because corn is a heavy nitrogen feeder. So they help each other. Pole beans and nasturtiums. So the nasturtiums are kind of sprawl out, but they also help by attracting the aphids away from the beans. And they'll draw in pollinators, which is great for the beans and the pollination. So you get a really heavy crop. And then, of course, the Three Sisters method that I just mentioned. So you also have like edible and pollinator mixes. I try to suggest to people to do this all the time. I know most of us who've been gardening for a while have always heard put those flowers in there with your vegetables or put your marigolds in there. Those help keep the bugs out. But I'm a fan of just planting zinnias or marigolds or something else that can act as a pollinator plant because that helps draw in the pollinators to pollinate your vegetables. So you get more of them because that's the whole point of this, right? Zinnias and squash or melons, those are going to attract the pollinators, so you get more fruit set, more fruit. Peppers and cherry tomatoes, again, you're going to benefit from an insect pollination. Calendula and the brassicas, that's going to draw aphids away from your cabbages and your kales and your broccolis. And then, of course, herbs, they're going to have provide the shelter, nectar, and all that other good stuff for a lot of those predatory bugs, which will eat the bad bugs. So you've got your parasitic wasps, mantids, ladybugs, that kind of thing. They can also act as repellent. Alliums repel or make slugs not want to come. Aphids, carrot flies, cabbage looper maggots, all sorts of stuff. And again, onions and garlic, you can put them, because they're in that family, place them around the edge of the raised beds. You're not using that space typically, so why not put some of those there? You'll get another crop and you get the benefit that they repel all that bad stuff. Trap cropping. This method is thought to lure pests away from desirable plants. So sometimes blue Hubbard squash with zucchini, it lures away the vine borers. The blue Hubbard squash is not as desirable a squash, so most people will grow it. It's rather large, but they don't eat the squash. And then sunflowers and tomatoes, leaf-footed bugs really love sunflowers for some reason. So they'll all be attracted to the sunflowers and hopefully leave your tomatoes alone. And then, as I mentioned before, there's nitrogen fixing legumes, buckwheat, potassium, and in rye, you can get manganese from beets. Same vegetable, different variety. So if you really love tomatoes, then you can plant a bunch of different tomatoes. So when you go looking for that particular seed, you're going to flip that seed package over and you're going to look at the date to maturity or harvest. And that's going to be the number of days it will take from the time you plant that seed to the time it's ready for harvest. You're going to select several different types of vegetables of the same type that have different maturity rates. So maybe you select one that has a 50 days till maturity, another one that has a 65 days, and then another one that has maybe 75 days. And that way you're getting a continuous harvest of, say it's determinate tomatoes that we're maybe picking. You get a continuous harvest every 15 days, give or take. So that's a good thing to do. And you can see there's different maturity days: broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, carrots, that kind of stuff. So these are some lists of plants that have a lot of different varieties out there, and you just have to go out and get those seeds to pick the ones that are going to be working best for you. All right, harvest fruits and vegetables promptly. Um, it goes without saying, you're obviously wasting produce if you're doing that, but make sure you get them off the plant. And the reason being is that plant wants nothing more than to complete its life cycle. Most of these plants are going to be annuals or biennials, and they just want to complete their life cycle. What we're doing is making them work extra hard. So we want them to work extra hard for us. And that means you got to get that fruit, whatever it is, that vegetable, the cucumber, the watermelon. You got to harvest that lettuce before it bolts. It's going to shut down growth and put up flowers for seed. That's what it does when it bolts. Lettuce does, or any of the brassicas like your Brussels sprouts or broccoli. It puts up a flower shoot and it's trying to bolt and it's trying to set seed so that it can die. And we're trying to say, nope, you can't do that. We want you to produce more for us. So you take that off. So get the aging vegetables and fruits off the vine and, try to harvest them before that. Always welcome at a food bank. So even if you have no desire to do that as an ongoing project, if you have too much, go donate it. You don't have to try to find your neighbors and go, hey, do you want another zucchini? Go take it down to your local food bank. They are so happy to receive things like that. I can't say enough for folks if you do that. Food insecurity is a thing, and we want to help with it if we can. So again, over mature fruit, it's tough and icky, and then you have to get rid of it and compost it or something. So just, try to pick it before you can. Or if you're going on vacation and you're in a community garden, ask your neighbors or one of the other gardeners there, hey, if stuff is growing, can you come pick it? And then you can either keep it or donate it. And that way you still have stuff that you can use. Okay, gardening all 12 months of the year. Again, we are blessed here in Georgia and we can do that. But you got to know what you're doing and how to do that. So, yes, there are an awful lot of QR codes on here. And believe me, you will be happy that I put them here. So, first, figure out what the first and last frost dates are. So, here in Gwinnett, we're in zone 8A. We just changed that. Here you can go to the Farmer's Almanac. They have a handy dandy little put your zip code in and it will spit out your first and last frost dates. So very simple, very easy. And just remember, that's just a mean. It doesn't happen every year. Sometimes it's later, sometimes it's earlier. Always listen to the weatherman or woman, and they should be able to tell you within 10 days or so what's going to happen. Use plant protection, row covers, cold frames, hoop houses, all of that fancy stuff or not so fancy stuff. Have them available because sometimes we get an early frost and sometimes we get a late frost. It just happens. So you just have to have the stuff there to protect it. Consider the fall factor. As we move into fall and winter, shorter days, longer nights, cooler temperatures, and less intense sunlight. So always kind of as a rule of thumb, add about 15 days to days of maturity, simply because soil temperatures begin to drop and your sunlight is not as intense. Check out that College of Ag over at UGA, the Weather Network. There is all sorts of information on there. You can look at soil moisture, soil temperatures, air moisture, humidity, all sorts of stuff. Farmers use it. And as gardeners, you should use it too, because it will tell you in the spring what the soil temperature is. May not seem that important, but if you have a lawn and you don't want crabgrass, it is very important because you got to know when to get that pre-emergent down. But it's also important to know that if you're going to put tomatoes or something else in there, you want them to grow. So if it's too cool, the soil temperature is too cool, you can wait. Or if it's warm enough, then you can go ahead and put it in. So that's an important website. And then the vegetable planting guide, that from Colorado State, that's going to help you know what the perfect soil temperature is for whatever vegetable you're planting. It is not all inclusive, but it has a lot of good information about most crops as an average. So that one is a very good guide for that. And then of course UGA's vegetable planting chart, that you see there on the bottom picture, and it is perfect for Georgia and very colorful and pretty. We often hand those out, but it has most of your crops. It tells you what season, when, how closely you should plant them together, days to maturity, that kind of stuff. Very important. And kind of have in their back pocket the occasional frost down to 25 degrees. We do get those, usually in late January and early February. So have some things like mustards, carrots, cabbage, lettuce, kale, all of those. Those can make it through those cold temperatures. So that is when you want to have that stuff growing in your garden because it can tolerate a lot. IPM, I have to mention that. That is something that Extension puts a stake in the garden for. OSU here that's Oklahoma, has a really good document that's for homeowners so that you understand it. Most of you are probably doing integrated pest management, but you probably don't realize to what extent. This can help guide you so you have a better understanding of what you need to do and why you're doing it. And you can see the pyramid here. As you start at the bottom, it's cultural, like good sanitation, getting all the weedy stuff out of your garden, getting diseased plants out so that you don't reinfect for next year. Then there's physical and mechanical. You're going to go out there and actually physically remove those weeds or something like that. Biological, you're going to bring in some predatory insects like those wasps that will prey on the tomato hornworm, and then chemicals. This is where you're hitting your organic pesticides, your repellents, diatomaceous earth, neem oil, that kind of stuff. And up at the top, you've got your conventional pesticides. We don't say don't ever use them. We simply say try all the other stuff first and really put some elbow grease into it and have a threshold. And if you like go out of the country for a week for a vacation and come back and you notice that the bean beetles have taken over, by all means, spray. But just try to do a better job for the environment and not hit those or non-organic type pesticides or even some organic pesticides because they're not all 100% safe. Try to do the other stuff, the biological, the physical, cultural, mechanical first. And there's some prevention techniques. So using marigolds, remove the lower leaves of tomatoes to prevent blight using some kind of mulch like wheat straw underneath to prevent splashback of those spores up on the tomato leaves. Cucumbers, don't plant them too close together for powdery mildew. Get those overripe pieces of fruit out because those just attract pests. Your brassicas, your broccolis, and things like that. Get a row cover. That way you don't have to worry so much about the cabbage looper. And rotate your crops. A very easy one if you can do that. I know it's harder to do if you're in a raised bed, but you still can do it. And there are a lot of pests that overwinter in the soil. And, you know, if you do that, then it's harder for them to find those host plants. In some cases, you have to balance disturbing the soil biome with, if you're in a community garden situation, with maybe using the cold weather in January and February. You get out there and you turn that soil over so that any insects that are in there, if that bed had not had somebody taking care of it very, very well, that might help lessen some of your insect problems, as does solarization. I don't mention that in here, but that is also something you lay down plastic, and that helps raise the temperature in the soil and it helps to kill a lot of organisms that are in that top inch or so. So you can mix all of those. You also have to understand the insect life cycle. So know when to flip the leaves over and look for those eggs and squish those. Way easier to do that than trying to kill an adult. And there are also things like you can also pull out where you're doing that interplanting or succession planting. You can pull out if you've got a squash crop that's already infected. Get it out of there, bag it up, throw it away, and then plant a new one. So you've already started some plants inside, you bring them out. You just got rid of a whole generation. So you might be able to go the rest of the summer without worrying about it. Composting, big fan. A lot of people do it. It's also cheaper than getting the big bags at the store. So it's going to add nutrients. It's going to add organic matter. When it's in there in the bin, you've got composting organisms. You got little roly-polies and worms and centipedes and other stuff. They're the ones breaking all of that down, but they also kind of live there and they're not bad. Don't be afraid of them. They're okay. They're the good guys. And it also adds in that water holding capacity. So when it rains, it's not just going to go like a sieve right out of your raised bed. It's going to be held there because that compost soaks up some of that water, which is good. So if you're also using manure or dry leaves, and I have to say a caveat on manure, be very careful on your source. If you're getting it commercially, you should be fine if it's in a bag and you're getting it at a store. But if you've got the local horse farm down there, you need to ask them what kinds of pesticides they're using. Fly spray, if they're spraying anything for broadleaf leaves in their pasture. Grazon, Grazon, is a broadleaf leaf killer in it's like a perchlorum, I think. It's something that can cause a lot of problems if it's in the soil. So there's no withholding period. You can keep your animals on it. It's a growth inhibitor. Now it's been on the market long enough. We usually don't get very many calls about it. Everybody kind of knows. But if you're new to gardening and you think, oh, great, the horse farm down the road, be careful and ask them. And you may want to get the manure, but you may want to set it in a pile for a year or two. If they say, yo, yeah, I use Grazon, then it's okay. You just need to leave it in a pile for about 3 years. It does not break down in UV radiation. Most of the rest of the pesticides that are used on farms are going to break down fairly quickly, but that is one that does not. So always ask. You want to know how long or what they use in their pasture. Um, Chop and drop. So if you don't have any disease or anything else and you just have leftover greens like what you see up there in the top left corner, chop it up and put it kind of back in there to build nutrients. If you're not going to grow anything right away, then let it return to nature. It's going to add more nutrients to the soil. You might make your own compost pile. Just layer your browns and greens. We've got another lunch and learn on composting coming up next week. I'll not be giving that. My colleague Jonathan Cassidy will be giving that, but that one should give you the basics of composting and how to do it. And then, of course, if you would like more information, you can check out the University of Minnesota Extension, Composting in Home Gardens. Lots of good ways to start there. Mulching, that's going to shade your soil. It keeps the weeds from germinating, the weed seeds, and it's going to help keep soil moisture. There's a lot of different types of mulch. You can use wheat straw, you can use pine straw, you can use any type of organic matter, really. If you've got some dry grass that doesn't have any herbicides or anything in it, you can use that. Obviously, be careful with weed seeds, but that helps keep the compost that you just put in your soil in the soil longer. It's a barrier between the UV radiation and all of that. It helps keep it wetter, moister. The plants like it, and it will eventually break down into organic matter. So that's a good thing. And you can put this on your walking paths too. Next up, make a annual calendar. I know it's hard. Nobody wants to do that, but UGA helped you out on this one. If you follow that little QR code up in the corner, that is their vegetable garden calendar. It's very pretty. It's got the same colors as what you see here, and it will go through month by month what you need to think about doing with regards to your garden. So again, you'll see this if you want the recording, it'll be at our YouTube channel, or you can request a copy of the slide deck. And then here's your succession garden scheduling. So step one, you're going to map out your vegetable garden beds. If you only have one, it's easy. You just map it out by spring, summer, fall, that kind of thing in one bed. But you're going to diagram each bed by season. List what's going to be planted in that spring, summer, and fall time, and then adjust as you go through the years. But having a nicely drawn out plan makes it so much simpler. So a lot of work on the front end, but going forward, much simpler and an easier kind of pathway to follow so that you don't have to keep doing that out because you just adjust as necessary. So the timing of planting, you're going to want to look and see what that first frost date is in the spring and the last frost date in fall. Remember, I had the almanac link there, so you can go back and get that if you need to, and that gives you that valuable information. That's your growing season, in other words. So if you're not in Georgia and you're somewhere else, that is absolutely fine. They will have your information there too. And then figure out your planting time for whatever vegetables you're looking at. It's going to be on your seed packet. Just flip it over and look there. And then find the days to maturity. Next up, you're going to choose spring and summer plantings because remember, we're kind of figuring here that you're in Georgia, but again, if you're in Minnesota, that's fine. If you're in Florida, that's fine. You just need to adjust based on what your growing season is. And it's going to be based on the last frost date in the spring and the first planting date. And then you use the subsequent plantings. You're going to add that interval. Remember, we had charts a little while back that showed the interval for each of those types of crops and adjust that plan as needed. So maybe it's really rainy and cool this spring. Well, you'll adjust it a little bit through the season. And then for fall garden plantings, you're going to calculate backwards from that last frost date. So let's say the frost date's November 19th in the fall and winter. You're going to go calculate backwards for your days to maturity. That's going to tell you when you need to plant that plant. It may be July. That's fine. Just as long as and that gives you a little bit of buffer there because rarely is it right on the money. So you may be actually picking, something else. Maybe we have a really warm fall. You might be picking tomatoes or squash into that time period before it gets really cold. And then here's a couple more charts. So vegetables for succession planting. This is, I borrowed this from a website and very handy information. So you can look, they're all alphabetized and you can see the interval. So arugula, you're going to plant every 2 weeks, basil, 2 weeks, beans, bush beans, 10 to 14 days, that kind of thing. So this is really kind of a good, way to figure out what you want to plant, and it also helps based on the amount of space you have. Two vegetables in one spot, so that works really well if you've got a slow grower and one that grows really fast, and you can see what the slow grower is versus what the companion is that grows fast, and then the same vegetable, different maturity. You're probably scratching your head going, well, I don't even know where to start there. Well, there you go. Broccoli, there's a lot of different varieties. Cabbages, corns, onions, potatoes, squashes, tomatoes, lots of different varieties. So you can pick and choose there. Garden scheduling, I already mentioned it, but you want to probably get yourself a garden um, journal or even just a notebook. I mean, you really don't need a fancy anything. You can just grab on the back to school sale that they'll be having here pretty soon, just grab a cheap notebook and that can be what you need. So weather and sunlight, you'll want to make notes of that so you can kind of keep tabs on what that year was like. Early crops and maturing, if you have lower temperatures, kind of figure out that you're probably going to have it's going to compress, the season's going to compress because it's going to take longer in the spring for the soil temperature to warm up. But later on, when you're adding the next additional crop, it's going to be warmer, so they're going to grow quicker. So you may plant them 2 weeks apart, but don't expect that your harvest is going to be 2 weeks apart. It might be 1 week. Insect and disease spikes, you kind of want to learn, like I mentioned, their life cycle. So this is how you do it. You can mark when there's bad dates and you're getting a lot of squash bugs or something else. Planning ahead. Figure out lists of plants that bolt and aren't producing, and that helps plan for space. So if you know they're going to die out in July, then you know you can in July add in a new plant. Match your climbing plants in spring, like your peas, with your climbing plants in summer. So you might want to put cucumbers on them or pole beans. And then think about trying new vegetable varieties and just make notes so that you can realize if you should ditch it next year or continue to grow it. Here's some more examples. Here's a compact productive garden. You can see the difference between kind of the easy, yeah, I'm going to do this, but I'm going to do it just, I'm not like really high energy on the easy large garden. And then the compact productive garden. You can see the difference in the amount of work put in here. And there's a lot more work that goes into the compact productive garden. So you have to figure out what's your style. Here's just some miscellaneous tips. So don't forget, again, to plant around the edges of the bed. I already mentioned that. You can do that with all sorts of plants. And you can hit that companion plants. You can put in some marigolds. You can put in some onions, herbs, that kind of stuff. There's a lot of unused space right around the edges. And you can also snip the pepper plant about 6 inches down. Again, these are just miscellaneous tips. It'll get bushier. That's because you remove the apical meristem. That is the growing tip of that plant. Works with flowers, works with everything, works with trees. The plant will produce side branches for a bushier kind of look. And then harvest all tomatoes right before that first killing frost. You see the stages up there. You want to take them anytime after the breaker stage. They will ripen. But you can always use green tomatoes for fried green tomatoes. Those are pretty tasty. And you might consider greens from the turnips and beets. And then, if inevitably, your raspberries will root if you're not careful. So you might decide to snip and you get a new plant. Plant rows of onions and then as they start to grow, harvest every other one. That allows you to take some green onions and then you get the bigger ones later. Lettuces, just take a few leaves as you need them for a salad and you can keep harvesting them. You don't have to go out there and cut the whole thing out. Then you have them for a lot longer. And then again, when you have a 6 to 7 week between major crops, plant those transitionals, bok choy, lettuce, arugula radishes. They quickly mature and you'll get that shoulder season crop. Let's see, and harvested that broccoli, you'll get other smaller, you won't get the same size, but you will get smaller heads from your broccoli. Just let them continue to grow. Miscellaneous tips, more. So after the onions get bulbs, you can kind of dig around them a little bit and they'll fill out a little bit more. You also, again, that soil test, I got to keep saying it, that pH is going to determine how that plant uptakes the nutrients. And you can see here again, the green means it's good. And you can see the blue outline, that's what plants like. That's the pH they like. So most of those are going to be in that range where you see the green. If you start varying outside that and your pH shifts down to 5 or 5.5, you can see a lot of them are in the red. So you need to make sure that whatever your plant that's growing there, it likes the pH. And if it's not, you need to see about adjusting your pH if that's what your soil test tells. Also, soil moisture, the old way of doing it, stick your finger in there, and if it goes down about 2 inches and it's still deep, it's still wet or moist, you're fine. I don't like doing that. It gets soil under my fingernails, so I just use a moisture meter. And you can stick that down about 2 inches, just mark 2 inches on there, and a little probe at the bottom will tell you based on where it is. You can see that little dial there, if it's wet or if it's not wet. And what you need to do is water. All right. So we are at the end, and I think, oh, I want 1 minute over. Awesome. Okay, so I am up for some questions if there are any, and I will just read down here. So if you have specific questions about anything in this or even anything that you have garden related or even not necessarily garden related, I can try to answer them. So um, let's see. Can you put up the annual calendar again, please? So again, if you would like the slide deck, I'll put my email address is right here. I'll put it in the chat box though. And then you can get your own personal copy. You don't have to snap a picture of it. There. That is my email address. That way you get everything and you don't need to worry about just taking a picture. Let's see. If you missed planting squash earlier, what's a good time to try again this summer? Honestly, it really depends. So if you, anytime now through probably July, so know that you're going to have to water, obviously, and you may have some challenges if you have other plants that are bigger because they'll get bushier and they may shade out your squashes. So just, know that that might be a challenge, but you can start growing them at any point up to probably mid-July. After that point, um, your days to maturity is probably going to be too long, and it might overlap into that fall shoulder season. And when temperatures in the soil start to drop, then they slow down in production. But the nice thing is after the squash bugs and the vine borers and all that are kind of out of the way, like it's already been past when they've laid their eggs and all of that. If you put them in after that, which they're kind of doing now, you have to be out there scouting for eggs now, then you might be able to skip some of that. Let's see, best ways to build your soil's fertility. So that's going to be probably just amending with compost, either compost that you have created or purchasing black cow or mushroom compost or something like that from a retailer. And if you have a raised bed, then that's probably the easiest way to do it. Most economical, not necessarily. That stuff can get kind of expensive if you're adding, 5 bags of that to your raised bed. But if you're in a raised bed, the likelihood that you have no mineral soil in there, meaning no soil that you would go out and in your yard and dig a hole in, is pretty high. Most of that is going to be like soil 3, or it's going to be a raised bed soil, and those are all considered soilless mixtures, meaning there's no mineral soil in them. So they get depleted pretty quick with fertilizer, and you have to go back and add periodically, whether it's organic or otherwise. You're going to have to add nutrients back in addition to all of that. So just make sure that, again, important with a soil test to know, excuse me, what they're lacking, and give back to the soil so that you are doing your plants right. Because if the soil's good, your plants will do wonderfully. Any tips for using grow bags? So I do use them, actually have them in my garden right now because I ran out of space for growing sweet potatoes and I had some slips. So I got some grow bags and I put them out there at the heads of my raised beds. I have a large area in the middle of my raised bed garden that is solely for pollinator plants and my flowers. And then I have other, I'll burn there too in the winter time. And then I have some raised beds that kind of ring that area, much easier to deal with weeds. And then I have I've laid down landscape fabric and I put wood chips on there. Much easier for weeds, let me tell you. And I like them and I don't like them. If we get lots of rain, it's great. They drain right through. Usually they have a little flip up area. So if you're growing potatoes or whatever, easy access for that. And you can always dump the soil out. They can move. They get heavy, but you can move them and put them in the raised beds. But if you don't have any other options, it's a good option. I don't like the felt ones as much as I like the plastic ones. I think they last a little bit longer for me if you get the heavier plastic ones, and they stay a little moister inside. But your mileage may vary. Everybody's a little different, I guess, in what they prefer. All right, let's see. If I want to grow tomatoes every year and rotate them in my raised beds, how far do the beds need to be so the same overwintered pests don't attack them again? It depends on how many raised beds you have, and it depends on, um, how many tomato plants you had. Typically, at least from what I've found, bugs are not the issue with the raised beds and tomatoes. It's the blight. Once you have a fungal issue in your bed, it's almost impossible to get rid of it. And you have to choose either a completely different location away from there, or you have to have a container like a bucket or something that you're growing them in. I'm actually doing that this year. My raised bed in my garden I've had for 20 years, and so it's got a lot of disease. And even though I rotate, there's only so much rotating you can do amongst like 6 beds. There just isn't. So I actually have some melons growing in the bed, and then I have buckets that I've drilled holes in that are sitting on the top of the bed with wheat straw, and I have tomatoes in there. And they kind of got a little wet with all of that rain, but now they're starting to pick up now that it's warmer and not quite as wet. So we'll see how they do. But sometimes you just have to experiment. Let's see, I've noticed that many of the watering hoses at our location have holes in them. Okay, well, so that is a maintenance issue, and that should probably be raised, excuse me, with the, I guess you're probably in a Harvest Gwinnett garden. If it is, raise it with the ambassador and let them know. If you're in a different community garden, then you probably want to raise that with the manager. Fix holes in garden hoses. That's not too terribly difficult. You can actually buy kits on Amazon for super cheap that will allow you to do that. But yes, if you're paying the money to have a raised bed someplace in a community garden, you should definitely have decent equipment so you can water your vegetables. Thanks. Yeah, the blight is getting to my plants. Yes. So we have early blight right now. July-ish is when we would expect late blight. It was kind of cool and wet, and that holds off the late blight, which really likes hot and dry. So I expect the late blight to start coming in here pretty soon. Hopefully you can if you haven't already, consider putting some type of mulch like wheat straw or pine straw or something down under your tomato plants. That will help so that you don't get a lot of that splashback when you water your tomatoes. Plus, it'll break down for organic matter, so it's a good thing. But we've had some early blight. Early blight, you can kind of, if you can get the plant to grow faster than the early blight, you can go in there and snip off or remove those leaves. They'll have a yellow with a little spotty appearance on there. And you can kind of get them to grow faster than the early blight, but that late blight will take them out. So if you can keep that at bay, that's an important thing. And sometimes you can use just spray copper fungicide. You have to do it like up under the leaves. It's going to be a contact barrier between that fungal spore and your plant. And if we're in a hot and dry situation, kind of like we are now, we're supposed to get rain tonight, but I don't really see any, then having that is going to be a bonus to you. You can, eke out a little bit more another week or two if you expect them to die. Like I do in mine. I'm happy if I get any tomatoes. Oh, thank you. Yes, hopefully I'll have a nice road trip. Looking forward to it. Does anybody else have any other questions? If you do, type them in the chat there and I will try to get to them. Hopefully everybody got something useful out of the presentation. And again, if you want my slide deck, my email address is up there and I'm happy to share that with you. And the recording will be up later after I'm back. All right. Well, thank you all. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. I appreciate you coming. Again, sorry my camera is not working. I'm not sure what's going on. But next time, hopefully it will be fixed. So everybody have a good evening and happy growing.